Welcome, ladies, to the Real Estate Investor Show, providing inspiration, strategies, and insight to empower women investors to live balanced and financially free lives. Now, here are your co-hosts, Liz and Andressa.
So in today's episode, ladies, this is a must listen. We interviewed Molly Fletcher, who spent nearly 2 decades negotiating and representing for top athletes, over 300 athletes. She's closed over 500 million in contracts during her tenure. And she has so much to share with not just peak performance, and I'm sure she saw that in her world, but how to negotiate in a way that works. And she was one of the first women agents, to really dive into this world and be in this business for a long time. So her content is phenomenal in that she not only shares a process by which to negotiate, but tactical things that you could do today. And I just love this episode.
One thing that I want to say is that she didn't start negotiating $1 million contracts off the bat, right? So she talks about the importance of practicing. And in real estate, and as moms, as partners, we negotiate every single day. We just don't realize that. And another important piece of negotiation is creativity. It's not just the money, right? You have time and you have so many other items that you can add to the mix and leverage. Such a great episode, ladies, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
Welcome back, ladies. This is Liz.
And this is Andressa.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Investor Show, where our mission is to empower women to live a financially free and balanced life. And whatever that looks like for them, as we always like to say, we are so excited to have Molly Fletcher on our show today. Molly, thanks so much for making time. She has been called the Jerry Maguire, the female Jerry Maguire, which I partially like and partially don't, because quite honestly, as a woman who runs a women's community, I kind of don't want a man's name and referring to women. But I love what you do. I love your background. We're so excited to have you on today. So thank you so much for making time for us.
Absolutely, you bet. As I said, I love having conversations like this. Hopefully, that'll help these awesome women.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. We're going to get into Molly, who she is, and her phenomenal background. And we're going to talk a lot of things negotiation today. Before we do that, we always like to get connected to you, share a quick tip, story, something that we're experiencing that you can bring into your world. And we're so appreciative to have you back on for another week. All the amazing women and men who listen and follow our show. So, Andressa, what is coming up for you today? What gem can you share with us and our wonderful listeners here?
Well, inside our investor community, and by the way, if you guys are not part of it, join it. It's a Facebook group. It's free. There's a ton of super rock star women hanging out there that can support you. So over there, I hear a lot of women that are looking to expand their team, and they're getting frustrated with managing the people, right? And just like, can they just do what I say and then go from there? And I heard this quote another day that I want to share with all of you that it made total sense to me. So when things are not going right, quote unquote, right, or as expected or as agreed, the person says, you must connect before you correct. And I said, that is right. That, when we go to a rehab project and we are behind schedule, maybe we're over budget, things are not right, you've got to connect. Because if you're just going like rock with rock, it's just going to create resentment. And the worst thing, ladies, you can do is to communicate with your general contractor over text message. And this seems so obvious, but I've seen full-length conversations over text. That doesn't work. Never did. Never will, in my honest opinion. So when you are facing, for all of you, if it is your general contractor, if it is your syndication team, if it is your private money lender, whatever the situation is, take a break, sit down, request to have a conversation and connect first. seek to understand, and then you course correct as you go. The most important thing is that both of you are working to achieve the same goal. So restating the same goal, listen, at this point over here, don't care whose fault it was or whatever it is. Let's see how can we create something to avoid the situation if what was the case, or create something that none of us even thought about. Create a new possibility that works, and you guys focus on that. Without that, the correction is just like, we have kids, we know that we need to engage in a different way, and with team members and whoever you're dealing with. Enrollment is the key. So please keep that in mind as you are building your team and taking your business to the next level.
I love that. Connect versus correct, right? Love that.
Connect first and then correct.
I think you still have to do that, right? You still have to correct.
Yeah.
I love it. Molly, so excited to have you on today's episode. What you've done, being one of the first women agents in the sports world. It just warms our heart with what we do and what we stand for here at the Investor community. So thanks for being on. We always like to kind of kick things off is what propelled you to get involved in what you're doing and what your career led you to do, especially in being such a pioneer as a woman. So if you can start there, that would be amazing. And then we have lots and lots of questions for you just to dive into all your great experience in negotiation.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was a student athlete at Michigan State. I played tennis, and I think I wanted to stay involved with sports, but I didn't know what that looked like. And so I moved to Atlanta to find a job in the sports space. And like a lot of our lives and a lot of our careers, it evolved a bit, right? I mean, I started doing lots of little odds and ends jobs, and I didn't have a lot of money when I got to Atlanta. I didn't know a lot of people, but the Olympics was here. Lots of pro teams, sports teams, and I'd grown up in East Lansing, then gone 2 miles away to college. So, through networking, through grinding it a little bit, through getting in front of people. And I always say, when you ask for advice, you get a job. And when you ask for a job, you get advice. And, I got an opportunity with a small agency, and then I saw a gap. And I think probably like a lot of your listeners, I mean, when you see a gap in the market, Arthur Blank, who owns the Falcons, who started Home Depot, told me once on my podcast, he said, Molly, if you see a gap in the market and you follow your heart, it's probably going to work. And at some level, that was what happened. I saw a gap. We at the agency had 4 or 5 clients, and I thought, gosh, there's all these baseball players in Atlanta. Let's go get them. And so I started recruiting and signing athletes, coaches, and it evolved over almost 18 years. And signed about 1,300 guys and 300, guys and gals over that, almost 2 decades. But then, to sort of your question, I saw this common thread between the best, the way they thought, behaved, recovered, navigated change, adversity. And so I wrote a book and thought, well, maybe this will help them. And then I wrote another one, and then I started speaking, and that's my world now. I speak and write, and we have training products and all that kind of stuff. So it's evolved over the last, 30 years.
Awesome. And Molly, you negotiated over 500 million in contracts and represented over 300 of sports' biggest names. Whew, let's take a break over there, right? So when you look back in those negotiations, and what surprised you the most during that negotiation with, I'm assuming, a male-dominant industry?
Oh, yeah. It was all men. I mean, the truth is I was often the only woman in the room, and often mistaken as the secretary or the attorney. And why is she in here? And certainly she doesn't know a thing about sliders and curveballs and double switches, and no way. So, what surprised me the most is in an industry that is incredibly competitive. There's actually more agents than athletes to represent, a lot of people say. So it's really competitive. But what surprised me, and kind of to your earlier comment, it's about relationships. It's about connection. And what I found is the better my relationships were, whether it was with the athlete or the coach or the team or the general manager or the manufacturer rep, with the better the relationship was, the quicker I could negotiate and navigate deals, and often the better the outcome. And so, a differentiator for me in an industry was certainly being a woman, but it was building strong relationships, nurturing and navigating those effectively so that I could close better deals and close them faster. And the world often thinks, well, gosh, as an agent, I mean, you're just taking the gloves off and it is on, right? But the truth is, I found that it was about the relationship. It was about connection. It was about all of those things was a big differentiator for closing better deals faster for my clients.
I have so many questions because I think about the movie Jerry Maguire. I can't help not think about that, Of course. And I think about there's always the sexy part of something, and then there's like the real part of it, right? In every world. Sure. When it came down to negotiating for these athletes, when you're building the relationship, because that doesn't always get talked about when we talk about negotiation building. It does, but then it's also how do you make sure you put your needs first and create win-win? But there's a lot of different techniques, tactics, what have you, when it comes to negotiation. And a lot of women don't even get in the game of negotiation. So a lot of women that are listening right now are negotiating properties and negotiating terms, especially right now with the economy shifting and traditional lending and institutional lending kind of getting tighter, interest rates going up. A lot of private money, a lot of creative financing happening in our world. Yeah. So that just opens the Pandora's box of need for negotiation. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading a point you made on one of your blogs and some of the work that you've put out there, saying that women are hesitant even to negotiate. Yep. So in other words, even before you negotiate, they're not even in the game. Yep. They're not even in the conversation. So for you, as representing these athletes, back to my original point, how did you navigate the relationship so that you can put your athlete first and also get the best negotiation you could for everyone? Because sometimes my point in asking that is that sometimes it's really hard for relationship-oriented people because they're hesitant because they don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to not be liked. They don't want to have ticked off. You wouldn't have wanted to tick off your client. So how'd you navigate relationship first as you tried to get the best for everyone?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the mistakes people make when they negotiate is they spend so much time worried about what they want, right? What is the outcome they want most? The amount of money, the terms, all the things that go into any deal. And instead, what I believe is that we've got to pull back and say, who are we negotiating with? How are they wired? What matters to them? Are they really only worried about the numbers, the financial side? Or are they more worried about sort of the long-term implications of this deal? Are they most worried about making sure the relationship stays intact and it doesn't get jammed up? What are they? Are they worried about the timing of the deal, the logistics of the deal? So the biggest, I think, mistake sometimes we make is we sit back and we go, well, here's the thing, we make our list of all the stuff. We've got to pull back and say, who are we navigating this conversation with and what matters most to them? So anytime if I was negotiating a middle infielder's deal with a team, I wanted to get inside that team's world. Who do they have coming up in the minor leagues? Who's on the free agent market, right? Who else is in that clubhouse right now that could help them? How important is this to this player, to the team and the reputation and the club? But I spent so much time preparing and getting in the head and the heart of the person I was negotiating with. And then the other thing I think is counterintuitive, but to your question about relationships, we also have to give to the people that we want to connect with. And this is counterintuitive. Like people think, well, no, man, you don't add value to the people you negotiate with. Look, in life, the more somebody likes you and the more they think you can help them, the more they want to connect with you and navigate conversations. And negotiation at the end of the day, it's just a conversation. It's a difficult one with a lot of moving parts and it zigs and zags and it's not a straight line, but it's a conversation. And we want to have conversations and navigate those difficult conversations with people that we, at some level, sort of enjoy dealing with. And so I think it's important to recognize that if people don't like us, they don't want to help us. And they're going to do what they can to maybe look somewhere else to try to close that deal. But preparation to me is integral. But to your question about what I want so badly for women in the world is to practice negotiating and to recognize that it's everywhere. It's it's everywhere we turn. It's negotiating our time. It's negotiating our energy. It's negotiating what we say yes to and what we say no to. So often people think of negotiation as financial and terms and money. And certainly it is a huge part of all of those moments. But I would recognize and challenge people to practice negotiating in the little moments, because to me, the reason that women aren't negotiating as much and what the data shows, what the research shows, and certainly in my own life, what my experiences have been, it's just a lack of practice. And because they're not practicing enough, because they're not doing it enough, they don't have the confidence. I mean, I certainly didn't start negotiating $100 million Major League Baseball contracts, right? Or $50 million coaching contracts. I mean, I started doing $25,000 autograph signings for a player, right? Or an endorsement deal or a speaking engagement, or heck, even trade outs for my clients, right? I'm going to have him do X and he gets free dry cleaning. I mean, I did deals like that. And so, but when you start with these littler deals, then when you get inside of the $100 million deals or the bigger deals, you've practiced enough that you can navigate them with confidence. Because, to me, the way that we ask for what we want when we're negotiating has everything to do with whether we get it or not. Our tone, our timing, our level of confidence in the way that we ask for what we want. It is integral to whether we get it or not. So when we practice a lot, we gain the confidence and the understanding to allow us to navigate those moments better.
In any single sport, right? Baseball, basketball, I played handball. We got to follow the rules of the game. And I think that many times women don't even know that they are being played, that there is just a matter of knowing the rules of negotiation. You mentioned voice tonality, you mentioned body language. What are the other unspoken rules that you would recommend women to observe? Because that is how it's like 101.
Yeah, for sure. And in our negotiation training, we touch on these, but I think a couple of the big ones would be, when we find ourselves maybe getting a little defensive, right? Which happens, doesn't it? Like whether they're not paying attention to us, whether we're not feeling respected, whether we're frustrated with where the deal is, we have to get curious in that moment. We've got to shift from defensiveness to curiosity. It's a big mindset shift, but it changes the way we show up. And there was lots of moments where I was getting defensive. I was frustrated. I was, I felt like it was my client, but yet they were talking to the guy that worked for me because he was a dude and he played baseball, right? So, and I would instantly shift to curiosity, to trying to find a way to connect, to ask questions and connect. The other big one to me is pausing. To your question, so often when people negotiate, they just keep going. They ask for, maybe they've connected, maybe they've laid the foundation, maybe they've asked for what they want, and then they just keep talking. If you've built the connection, if you've prepared, if you've laid the foundation, when you ask for what you want, zip it. It's like when you go to work out and you do abs with your friend and you're throwing that medicine ball, throw that ball over and just let them hold it. Let them hold it, because you know what? In that moment, you're sending a message of, look, I meant what I said. I mean it. Right. And this is where I am. And I think it's important to recognize that sometimes a pause can be 30 seconds, 2 minutes, a week, a month. Right. I was negotiating a baseball player's contract who was arbitration eligible, and we hadn't been able to get it done. And so we were going to have to go to arbitration, which is when I put a guy in a room with 3 strangers to make a decision on what my guy's going to get paid. And I never liked to do that. It's not good for the athlete. But so we'd been negotiating for 4 months and we just couldn't get it done. And I thought, man, this is unbelievable. Now I'm going to have to go to arbitration at 11 o'clock that night. And I had laid the foundation. I'd asked for what I wanted. I had a great relationship with this general manager. He calls me up at 11 o'clock at night. The next morning, we're flying to Phoenix for the hearing. And he said, "Hey, Molly." I said, "Yes." And I was sound asleep, right? He said, "You're firm. I mean, you're headed to Phoenix." I thought I'd get a call from you. And I said, "No, man, we're firm." And I just paused. And it was a minute and a half. And my husband was sort of there. And he said, is he still there? Right? Like, you got to be joking. And I was like, yes, shh. And literally a minute and a half later, he goes, unbelievable. You got a deal. You got a deal. I'll email you over the term sheet. And it was done. And that at the core was about pausing. In that moment, I could have gone back to all the things that I'd already said, all the reasons why my guy could have gone through. I'd done all that. I needed him to know, like, dude, we're not kidding. Like, because you start talking in that moment and he goes, all right, you got a deal, but we're gonna pull these bonuses out. All right, you got a deal if we drop the base to X or Y. But I just sat there and we got what we wanted. And I also had a client that was confident and ready to stay firm, which was, of course, helpful as well.
I want to talk about the over talking piece. I did door-to-door sales, and they have this acronym called KESS, keep it short and simple. And we knew that we over talked when we heard the following sentence. Let me think about it. Oh, that was hard. But at the beginning, you're like, this is so great. This is going to support your business. You're going to grow. And then you're excited. And then you don't shush. And there's like, okay, let me think about it. And then it's just like, I just over talked the situation. It's so crucial. And I only learned paused years later when I worked for a commercial developer, Jim, if you're listening, let's get lunch. Super important. I observed him negotiating multi-million-dollar deals, complicated situations, and he had on his chair, like he moved his chair. People couldn't see him or do anything, but he was having so much fun with the negotiation. And at certain points, he will pause and he will do like this for me. And he will mute people. He will talk about something else. And I was like, exactly what you said. Are they still there? Yeah. He's like, yeah. And whoever speaks first is going to lose.
Yep.
So I start practicing it. I'll mute myself and just go silence. And it works so perfectly. You gain this unspoken confidence where you stand, but you got to back it up too, right? You cannot just pretend, as you were saying, because the person that you had, you got to make a decision about it and then stand. My question to you is, when do you know it's not going to work?
When do you know to walk away?
Exactly.
Yeah. When do you know when to walk away? I mean, here's what I think it's important to ask yourself. Am I going to be excited, if you will, or am I going to be happy if this deal goes through under these conditions, right? Like, am I going to regret the terms of this deal and have to live into it? Right. And I think that we have to ask ourselves that question. Is this a deal that I want to service against on these terms? So if I had a client who grinded me on my fee with them, and maybe, I always say you got to be better than your problems, right? And maybe they weren't better than their problems. So now I'm at X% when it should be at Y. And I know that guy or gal is going to call me every day and have expectations to be served like everybody else. And so if you have to be very intentional, you have to pull back and say, because there's nothing worse than agreeing to a bad deal. And so how do you know? I think you've got to just get clear with yourself. Do I want to service this relationship and this deal under these terms? And if not, we've got to walk away, because the truth is it's compromising our ability to be a part of something else. So it's not just about that deal. It's the fact that that's going to suck time from you, energy from you, resources from you, that now you can't pour into something else that might have been better. But I also think it's important to pull back and say, how do I leave this in such a way that the relationship stays intact? And that takes energy. It takes intentionality. It takes all those things. But for me as an agent, it was incredibly important to always keep the relationship, because if you've got 50 guys in the big leagues and there's 30 teams or whatever, you got to make sure that that you can pick up the phone if you take a pass on the Yankees and call them back for another guy. So the relational piece is an important thing to ask yourself. How do I best walk away in a way that allows this relationship to stay intact? And, in general, I believe it's about authenticity. It's about transparency. It's about being real with people and being honest. And often, obviously, that's what's going to help keep that relationship intact.
As I'm hearing you talk about your experiences, Molly, all the things that you're saying make someone or can make someone a really effective negotiator. I think about so many of the women in our community, and what is dawning on me right now, if that's even the right way to say it, is that women actually have a lot of the right recipe to be actually amazing negotiators.
Totally.
And I'm thinking about myself, right? Because whenever we're interviewing someone, whenever we're in the game of anything, how can we not think about ourselves? And I've never seen myself like, Liz, in 3 words, would amazing negotiator being the top 3 ways you describe yourself. I probably wouldn't use that in the top 3. I don't know if I use it in the top 10, but I got to say, my way of being, I actually could be a very good negotiator.
Absolutely.
Very good negotiator. And what's coming up for me, and I think could come up for a lot of other women, in that the who are you speaking to, the authenticity. Hey, if this is not going to work, how do we end this in an amiable way? That's, women are that naturally. And what I'm saying that is that we negotiate with our kids, we
100%.
negotiate with our spouses, we negotiate with neighbors. I negotiate all the time. I don't think I've ever called it negotiation, because when I think of negotiation, I think of a boardroom, I think of a hard-nosed terms, and I think about that as negotiation. And I think we need to stop thinking of that, because if we don't think of that as negotiation and we actually think it's more of this, a collaboration, I think women would jump in faster. I think they would negotiate faster, because I think we've all looked at it a little more like the boardroom way of looking at it versus the who are we talking to? The question I have for you is, how do women practice? Things that are popping into my head are, how do I practice more? How do I practice more? There's so many ways to practice. How have you seen women practicing? How have you, women and men, certainly anyone practicing?
And I really love the way you wrapped that bow around that, because I hope that women heard you. I think that's a really great way to say it. And I couldn't agree more. I think the first way you practice is to recognize what you just sort of are seeing at some level, right? Which is that it's everywhere. It's with our kids. It's with our spouse. It's with the lawn guy. It's with the housekeeper, the nanny. It's everywhere. And if we have the wherewithal, you go get your car washed and the guy says it's $20 and you say, cool. Well, if I pay 18 in cash, what do you think? Is that better for you? They're like, yeah, sure. I'll take 18 in cash. Yeah, cool. It's everywhere you turn. And so I think we've got to have the courage to do it in really small moments like that, in what I believe are potentially maybe more transactional type situations, and practice. And for me, I think it's opening the lens up to say it's everywhere. And I grew up in an environment with a mother who brought, 30 coupons to the grocery store. Half of them were expired. And we get to the checkout line and the lady would go, well, it depended on the kind of attendant you got. So I'd watch my mom walk up and look at the attendants and try to figure out who she thinks she can connect with, who she could maybe work a little bit to take these other 15 that are expired. And then we get in the line, and then, the lady would maybe say, I see you got, this coupon. I'm sorry, it's expired. And she'd go, oh man, gosh, I came here because I wanted to use that coupon. I want to use it here. And she'd just work her for fun. And often, right, the lady would go, all right. Cause she liked her. Right. So practice in all these little moments. You find a dress at Nordstrom's and it's got a stain on it. Work them. Get 25% off because you can get the stain out when you get home. I have 3 daughters, and when they were 6, we needed to get braces. And we had 1, and then we had twins 12 months later. That's a whole nother story. But we have 3 little miracles under 12 and a half months. And so I'm at the orthodontist, and the orthodontist says, of course, they all need braces, and shocker, right? And they did. And I said, okay. So I walk into the back room with the manager person, and she says, here's the deal. This is the impetus around it. It's $3,000 a piece. So it's $9,000. it's a 24-week cycle, blah, blah, blah. She walks me through the whole thing. And I said, sort of pause and I go, wow, man, your waiting room, is it always this busy? Like, how does that work? And she goes, oh yeah, it's always, and they're in a great location. I said, wow. And I said, you got 5 chairs? Like, yeah. And I said, how many people you see a day? And she's going through it. And I said, wow. And I said, do they all pay on time and all that? Because there's a payment schedule, right? And she said, oh no, that's half of my job, man. I got to chase all these people down that don't pay. And I go, wow, that's kind of a bummer. And she goes, oh yeah, I hate it. It's the least favorite part of my job. And I said, man, that's a nightmare. And she goes, yeah. And I said, hey, what if we did something, right? Like where I give you $6,000 cash and I just pay you right up front. We're done. We pay for all the girls. I trust you guys. I know they had an incredible reputation, all that kind of stuff. And then we just, it's like a buy 2, get 1 free ortho deal. And kind of laughed. And she goes, well, oh my God, I've never done that. Let me go talk to the docs and see if we can. Comes back 5 minutes later and goes, done. They love it. Yeah. You're good. Write a check for 6. And then, I say that only because it was about getting in her head and heart. What is she worried about? She doesn't want to chase people down for money. She's busy. She's got a waiting room. And look, now we solved that problem for her and kind of everybody won, right? But it was about getting curious. It was about anticipating, kind of what are the things that she wakes up every day and worries about. But at the end of the day, I tell that story really because most people in the world don't think that you grind it with an orthodontist office, right? But it's just an example of, to your question, you can practice everywhere. You can go to Starbucks and, oh man, I wanted to get that extra shot in my latte. Let me go talk to that barista and see if I can get a little free instead of paying the 25 cents. Let me see. And I'm not suggesting that we're cheap, and I'm not suggesting any of that. But what I am suggesting is just have a little fun, practice, just try in little moments. And the more comfortable you get asking for what you want and the more you do it, the better you get in the bigger moments.
I love that.
I remember years ago in one of the, workshops, masterminds, whatever it was, the situation. We were at this conference and we were closer to a mall. And one of the exercises that we had to do, we paired up in small groups of 4 or 5 people, and we needed to go to this mall to get stuff for free. And I was like, impossible. They're all corporate. I don't have the decision maker in front of me. And all of that started running in my head, right? And then the guy said, relax, people. Whatever you can get, a little extra scoop of ice cream or whatever it is. The goal here is for you guys to practice. Practice whatever it is. And if you buy something, try to get something extra. Oh, you bought a pair of shoes because you were going to buy it, but can you get a pair of socks for free? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I remember that we leverage the food. We were a group of 5 and he said, listen, we're going to all eat over here, but we want all our drinks comped. And a couple of people said, can't do that. Cannot do that. And then we found one restaurant. The manager was there. And then we got it. And it's just the practicing of it. Yeah. At the end of the day, we were just doing it for fun. It was like, who gives a nobody knows us here. We're not going to come back to this city. So who cares? Let's just ask. And we just got into very interesting conversations. My point to you, Molly, is why we cannot, or women that are listening, cannot afford to avoid non-negotiating. What is on the table?
Oh, man. I mean, I would just encourage, number one, all the emotional intangibles of regret, feeling taken advantage of, feeling that we're not being copped like somebody else in our space. I mean, all those things. But then just pull back and do the math. Just do the math over whether it's a career conversation and your comp inside of your career. Do the math. It's staggering. If at 23 years old, young girls start a job and then they transition, however they transition, but if they're not asking for what they want and getting it, if they're not consistently having the courage to have those conversations, depending on the level of the employee and their package and all those details, it can be hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars, depending on who it is and what they do. So there's that piece of it. But I would say the bigger piece of it is not feeling like you're being paid at the level by which you deserve and or is comparable to other people that you work with or to others in that same role from an industry perspective and a comp perspective. And it's funny, like I have, when a baseball player, so often the world looks and goes, why does that guy need all that money? But the truth is, it's also a little bit sitting inside of the way the organization is going to view that athlete, the amount of energy they're going to put around him, the amount of support they're going to put around him, the amount of resources they're going to put around him when he gets hurt. When you pay a guy this kind of first round money, for example, if he gets hurt, even if it's a third round guy getting first round money, they're gonna make sure that guy gets back out on the field. And so at some level, we have to recognize that it's about the way that we're treated inside of circumstances and situations too. So there's the mental anguish, the emotional anguish of it, the frustration, and then there's certainly the financial and real implication of it as well. That's significant.
Yeah. And I keep thinking about like just financing, and that's a huge, right? You cannot buy real estate without someone's money and it's, the world is our oyster, even with banks, even with institutions, let alone private money. And we don't often know that we can even negotiate with a community bank on terms with there's so many pieces of this puzzle when it comes to investing in real estate that we could be negotiating that we're not asking, we're not mindful of. And it does come back to who are you negotiating with? Mm-hmm. Who are you building that relationship with? Mm-hmm. And, really evaluating it for yourself and not putting yourself secondary or last.
I would just add to that I had we had a group of sales people that went through our negotiation training, and it was interesting because we have this tool that we use that helps people prepare for negotiations. And one of the things is what is in play, right? Like what are all the things that are negotiable inside of this deal? And when we went through this exercise, traditionally, these sales folks generally just focused on 6 or 7 things that were kind of the default, pretty obvious things that are always in play. But when we went through that exercise, they were able to pull back and collectively expand that list to something like 23 different things that were in fact in play that could be used as a carrot or a stick or could be used inside of the deal. And it was powerful because, to your point, often we default to the comfortable, to what the world, the standard, the industry, to what we tend to always sort of lean into. But pull back and get creative, right? To me, one of the other things that's incredibly important in negotiation is creativity as you prepare. Get creative, because there's often more in play than we recognize on the surface.
Yeah, I want to relate that to a conversation we were having with one of our Strive members about negotiating a equity deal. So, basically building a partnership to buy a property and to go off, get into a project together. And it was interesting in navigating that conversation together. What we often think in negotiating is the players are in the room, right? The 2 people we're going to go into partnership with. But I reminded her, and I want to say this because it's so pertinent right now with creative financing, is that it's not just the 2 people. It's the 2 people. If this goes well, who the 2 people know? If they have money to invest and they're looking to, build partnerships with very active investors, they know other people like themselves, right? Mm-hmm, high net worth individuals, or have that ability to. So negotiation is not just taking away; it's also adding to, not just the people in the room. And I think in our world of creative financing, that's a big piece, and that's a piece that we don't often think about, especially 100%. When it comes. Especially when it comes to that, private individuals just creating opportunities together. So it's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and it's so great getting into a lot of this with you from such a different sector, yet there's so many similarities. I think that's the point of why we were so excited about getting into this topic with you in particular, Molly, is because we can learn so much from different industries that we can relate to our own. And what you've shared today has been just so helpful. So where can the ladies listening learn more about you, connect with you further, and see all the great things you're doing with your business?
Yeah, well, thank you for what you do and helping women in the space and men, like you said. I mean, that's awesome. MollyFletcher.com is my website, and people can go there and kind of everything will stem from there that people could be interested in. We just launched a new course on sort of 8 keys to unlock next level success. That's pretty awesome. We just launched it last week. That's what's making me think to share it. But all that's on MollyFletcher.com. If people are interested, check it out.
Awesome. All this information you guys can find on our show notes. Now we're going to transition to our fabulous 3 questions. The first question for you, Molly, is what's the most transformational book you ever read?
Wow. The most transformational book I've ever read. I mean, I guess I would say probably the Bible, candidly, pretty transformational and pretty powerful, obviously. Enough said with that one, but the Bible.
Awesome. Second question is, what's the most powerful routine that you do to live a financially free and balanced life, whatever balance means to you?
Financially free. I mean, number one, I mean, we are, my husband is an incredible part of supporting our business. He's also in the commercial real estate space, but I mean, we're pretty debt adverse. And, I think that allows you to live a free and balanced life when you are incredibly intentional and consistently investing. I mean, we are consistently and kind of play the long game in that space as well.
Awesome. Last question. Which woman, famous or not, has inspired you the most?
I would say, there's a lot of women that have inspired me that I don't know. I don't know Oprah. I think she's incredible. I don't know. I've spent some time with Billie Jean King, which was a real treat, but I don't know her incredibly well, but I have spent some time with her. She's unbelievable to me, what she did for the game of tennis, a sport that changed my life in an enormous way. Serena Williams, are you kidding me? I mean, just unbelievable. Obviously, as an athlete, and now seeing her step into this role as a mother and loving every minute of it and pouring into her daughter is just really cool. But to say the one, it would be my mom. I mean, my mom and dad are really close. And my mom is somebody who obviously I know incredibly well and who I talk to every day at 50 years old, and she's 80. And we talk every day, and she's a person in my life who can say things to me pretty directly, but it also snaps me right back into shape if I needed it. So, and I just have a lot of respect for the kind of wife she is, the community leader she's been. She worked in the public schools with underprivileged kids forever, 30 years as a teacher, and ran about every board in our community. I just have a lot of respect for her and have always tried to model myself in so many ways after her, because I'm grateful because, when you're in that age and space, there's a lot of money and there's a lot of really, planes and boats and fancy this and that. And you can get sucked into that if you're not intentional. And, I always felt like my mom, when I was probably a little bit vulnerable at 26, 27, 28, kept me locked and loaded on what matters most in life. And I'm super grateful for that.
That's awesome. That's great. Sounds like a phenomenal woman. Molly, thank you so much for being on our show. Thanks for sharing all your wisdom today. We appreciate your time so much. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to receive updates on our next interviews, go to our website, therealestateinvestor.com. There, you can subscribe to our show, become part of our investor community, and get updates on upcoming episodes.
If you like our show, please share it with other women who would benefit. And don't forget to leave us a rating on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. And as always, we encourage you to take one action as a result of today's show and put it into motion so you can live both a financially free and balanced life. Thanks for spending time with us.
Ciao.